Billionaire discovered his maid's daughter, 12, washing dishes at 3 a.m. What he uncovered was in. Jack Thompson stood by a sprawling window, the glittering lights of San Francisco twinkling like stars scattered across a sea of ebony. It was past 3 in the morning, and sleep eluded him, his mind racing through the last quarter's figures and the looming decisions that could shift the very ground he stood on. But tonight's unrest wasn't just about stocks or market shares. It was rooted in something deeper, something profoundly personal. He shifted his focus, dimly aware of the emptiness echoing through the lavish mansion, the silence a sharp contrast to the chaos reigning inside him. As he wandered the vast hallways, shadows flickered across walls adorned with art that felt more like a personal prison than a collection. It was in the kitchen, an unassuming room usually filled with the bustle of staff, where Jack stumbled upon an unexpected sight that struck him like a bolt of lightning. Maria, the maid's 12-year-old daughter, knelt hunched over the sink, scrubbing dishes as tears slid down her cheeks, each drop a testament to her exhaustion and emotional burdens. The sight stirred something in Jack that he had buried deep beneath his layers of success: empathy, guilt, and a nagging urgency he couldn't quite recognize. A moral dilemma unfurled in his mind. While he had spent decades climbing the corporate ladder, never once considering the weight of daily struggles faced by others, here he was seeing the harsh reality of someone so young. Maria was drowning not just in a sea of dirty plates, but also caught in the undertow of academic pressures, her mother working long nights to provide for a family that had little in stark comparison to the world Jack inhabited. The realization twisted like a knife in his gut. Should he intervene? Was his wealth merely a gilded cage, keeping him from acknowledging the real injustices people faced? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The thought of reaching out to her gnawed at him. The fear of judgment from his colleagues whispering in his ear. Who was he? A self-made billionaire, to take interest in the life of a girl scrubbing dishes in the dead of night. Yet the desire to help Maria surged within him, unabated. Images of her aspirations, her dreams of scientific discovery, collided with the reality of her world, the world where privilege still shaped the ladder of success, often leaving those like her lost in the dust. Tension swelled as he envisioned offering her resources, access, mentorship. But the more he pondered, the less sure he felt. Would she see him as a savior, a mentor, or just another face of wealth? And what of those around him? Would they ever accept his choice? Jack's chest tightened, a wave of anguish washing over him as the truth loomed painfully evident. This could either bridge their worlds or irrevocably sever their connection. The stakes were infinitely higher than he could have ever prepared for, and despite the wealth that surrounded him, he felt the inexplicable threat of losing himself in the endeavor, abandoning the privilege he had once leveraged to define his identity. As the clock continued to tick into the stillness, Jack was at a crucible of transformation, caught in the crosshairs of wealth and moral obligation, increasingly aware of the danger in taking steps that could reconcile or expand the divide between his life and Maria's. Uncertainty hung heavily in the air, a thick fog clouding his thoughts, leaving him at a precipice where one wrong move could redefine everything, an impending revelation that could either draw them closer or fracture their worlds beyond repair. The dim glow of the moon filtered through the kitchen window as Jack stood there, the weight of indecision pressing down on him like a heavy fog. Every instinct honed over years of business negotiations shouted at him to retreat into his world of numbers and profits. But the sight of Maria scrubbing the dishes, a child burdened with adult worries, dared him to break down the walls he had built around his emotionless facade. "Hey," he finally managed, his voice unexpectedly soft, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Maria looked up, her wide, tear-stained eyes reflecting the discomfort of being observed. For a fleeting moment, Jack felt the gulf between their lives open like a chasm. She dropped the sponge, and for the briefest second, there was a mingling of hope and fear in her gaze. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone edged with suspicion. Typical for someone who had learned to navigate a world filled with strangers, especially those who seemed to tower over her both literally and metaphorically. I saw you here and I wanted to help," he stuttered, caught off guard by the sincerity required to cross this boundary. The urge to take a step back resonated within him, yet he took one forward, lingering at the border of their reconciled realities, his vast wealth and her stark struggle. "What if I offered to help with school or something else you need?" Maria blinked, confusion overtaking her features. "Help? Why would you want to do that?" It was a question laden with skepticism and disbelief, a testament to the invisibility he and the others in his world often cast over lives like hers. Jack's mind raced as he wrestled with the reality of his proposition. What would helping her actually look like? Resources? Yes. But perhaps mentorship, too. Guidance not just tailored for academia, but also for her youthful aspirations. He recalled his own childhood, the moments he had needed someone to offer a hand, rather than just throw money at the problems he faced. "Because you deserve better than this," Jack replied, leaning into authenticity. The words came out before he could reconsider. They felt truthful, raw. Standing there as a billionaire conversing with a young girl over a sink full of dishes forced him into a vulnerability he hardly recognized within himself. As her skepticism began to soften, a flicker of determination ignited within him. The cognitive dissonance of wealth, mixed with an undeniable need for connection, was too much to ignore. It was no longer just about the disparity of their lives or the superficial comforts that his fortune could afford. It was about dismantling the barrier that had defined him for so long. What if he could leverage his resources to create a real impact? What if he could not only change Maria's life, but also ignite a growing sense of purpose and fulfillment within himself? Ideas whirled in his mind with relentless fervor. Yet as soon as the thoughts emerged, doubt followed like a dark cloud. Was he truly capable of stepping into this role? Could he transcend his status as a distant billionaire to become someone meaningful in her journey? "Jack." Her voice broke the silence again, cutting through the fog of his thoughts. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." In that moment, as he looked into Maria's cautious eyes, Jack felt the iron grip of his past begin to loosen, revealing an uncharted path ahead. "I'm starting to," he confessed, feeling the weight of the moment shift. As he considered his next move, he realized that this one interaction could shape not only her future but his own. A leap of faith had to be taken, one that could change both of their lives forever. When Maria nodded slowly, a seed of trust planted between them, Jack felt an ember of hope ignite within him. But as he took a step closer, a deeper realization settled. This journey was only beginning, and the choices they would make together would test everything he thought he knew about himself. Before he could inquire further, a muffled conversation drifted in from the hallway. Two staff members discussing the doorman claiming to have seen a homeless man lurking near the mansion. Suddenly, Jack felt the looming threat of his private world bursting at the seams, and it left him questioning whether he could really protect Maria from the harsh truths he had faced. With a rush of conflicting emotions, he knew he had to decide: retreat to the comfort of his solitude, or dive headlong into this formidable new reality. The moment would define not just their connection, but the man he had yet to become. The air in the kitchen grew thick with unspoken tension as Jack grappled with the decision lingering before him. The muffled chatter from the hallway buzzed like a distant fly, an irritating reminder of the world just outside this small sanctuary of vulnerability. He could sense the walls of his carefully crafted existence pressing down, urging him to retreat to a space where he felt safe, where emotions were mere calculations on a balance sheet. But Maria stood before him, a mirror reflecting his own childhood struggles, an existence shadowed by adult fears and unmet needs. As he looked into her wariness, he recognized a challenge. Could he actually help her, or would his involvement merely serve to reinforce the disparities he had fought his whole life to ignore? "Tell me what you want," he heard himself say, the firmness in his voice belied by the uncertainty swirling within. It was an invitation he didn't quite believe he was ready to give. Though his wealth could afford her the world, it wasn't just about resources. It was his commitment and presence that mattered. Maria's expression shifted, her skepticism replaced momentarily with a flicker of hope. "You're serious, aren't you?" she asked, a hint of disbelief threading through her words. "I am." The resoluteness in his voice surprised even him. He didn't fully understand this new urge driving him, but the instinct felt critical. If he was to face this uncertain journey, he needed to confront not just Maria's struggles, but the deeply ingrained fears within himself. What if instead of merely providing, he engaged in a collaboration? As he pondered, he twisted a dish towel in his hands, the fabric creasing under his grip, just as his own reality crumpled under scrutiny. Helping Maria might mean unveiling portions of his life that he had long buried under layers of success, those insecurities about his own upbringing and his parents' failures that propelled him toward ambition. "I want to hear about your dreams," he said, grit and sincerity in his tone. "School and everything else. Let me know what you want to achieve." Her guarded demeanor softened just a fraction. He had managed to chip away at the armor she wore. But could she truly believe him? "I want to be a scientist," she replied quietly, her eyes lighting up with untempered enthusiasm, the veil of doubt dimming slightly. "But how can I do that? I can barely keep my grades up with all this." She gestured to the clutter around her, a chaotic reminder of a life weighed down by responsibilities unimaginable to a child. Jack recognized that her dreams could just be whispers, drowned out by the noise of her current reality. So, he leaned in, his heart surprisingly attuned to the weight of her aspirations. The first step is believing that it's possible. Allow yourself to envision it. That's where his journey and hers might intersect, by fostering belief. It was more than just financial help. It meant offering shared experiences, perhaps even mentorship. But he wrestled with the question of prohibitive boundaries. Who was he to guide her? The world had taught him the power of numbers, but left out the value of connection. Maria paused, gauging him, an internal battle mirrored in her cautious gaze. "What does that even mean for you? You just throw money around and expect everything to change?" Her tone, though edged with a childish bite, echoed truths he had long avoided. As her words hung in the air, each syllable became a striking reminder of the magnitude of his privilege and continued alienation. The challenge echoed, to not merely be a benefactor, but to become engaged in a real partnership. The distant conversation in the hallway grew louder, and Jack's thoughts darkened for a moment. What of the homeless man? Was he a reminder of the fragility of his reality, this attempt to reach out? A shadow loomed over their discussion, threatening to pull him back into a world he wished to escape. "Maria, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." Her gaze narrowed, wary once more. "Do you think we can change this?" His words bore weight, an invitation threaded with genuine concern. At that moment, he not only sought her answer, but also opened a window into his own personal reckoning. The flickering lights above them cast uneasy shadows, and the machinations of his world seemed to encroach once again. Jack's commitment crumbled under the weight of the unknown. What if embracing this journey meant exposing not only Maria, but also himself to the harsh realities of life that they both had evaded? But the flicker in Maria's eyes showed potential, the possibility igniting in both their hearts. He took a breath. knowing the next chapter was poised between hope and retreat, his decision diving deeper into the chaotic interplay of their lives. What lay beyond his threshold of comfort? Could he really bridge this chasm of privilege and despair, changing the very fabric of their lives forever? Or would he falter at the edge, paralyzed by his own past? Jack took a step back, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on his chest. Suddenly, the kitchen, once a comforting enclave, felt like a gilded cage, the walls shimmering with the glamour of his success, but echoing with distant cries of struggle. He had always found solace in the calculated risks of the boardroom, but here, facing Maria, the stakes felt infinitely deeper. "Let's map it out," he proposed, his voice gaining strength. "What do you need to include your dreams? Tackle the chaos." The question tumbled out, a spur-of-the-moment attempt to shift from idle conversation to actionable commitment. He didn't fully comprehend what compelled him, but vulnerability had a way of igniting a different kind of purpose. Maria's brow furrowed as she searched his eyes. The flicker of hope he had seen moments ago was tempered by suspicion. "Mapping it out? You mean like a plan?" Her voice held a mixture of incredulity and an unmistakable yearning. "Exactly," he said, desperate for traction. "We can start small, by breaking it down, just onwards from there." The thought of planning pierced through his own fog of self-doubt. If he was to guide her, he must first confront his own uncharted territory. But what did that entail? Jack pondered silently, the duality of nurturing hope while grappling with his own fears thickening the air. Maria's dreams were ambitious, a scientist, but her current reality, packed with obligations and societal expectations, loomed heavy. "Okay," she replied slowly, her defensive walls lowering just a tad, intrigued yet hesitant. "But what do you know about being a scientist?" Jack felt the burn of that question strike at the core of his identity. Science was a realm he had neglected, surrendered to data analytics and market foresight. Yet he had to show her that their worlds could collide. "Nothing. But I can help you with everything else," he asserted, determination wrapping cold fingers around his heart. Much like the clients he dealt with, he would have to learn, adapt, and grow alongside her, instead of simply attempting to pull her upward. "How do we even begin?" Maria asked, her voice a threaded mix of doubt and emerging trust. "Let's start by going through your daily routine," he suggested. "We will identify the distractions, the inefficiencies. Together, we can reinvent it." This declaration felt radically different from his usual sphere, less about performance metrics and more about human connection. As Maria began outlining her day, Jack actively listened, contemplating how often he had overlooked the untold stories behind the numbers he accumulated. Each obstacle she detailed, household responsibilities, school assignments, emotional exhaustion, transformed into stark reminders of a world he barely considered since he began climbing the ladder of success. "We'll use every last minute of your day to carve out time for the science," he stated, a renewed sense of mission growing within him. "I don't know if I can believe that," she retorted. "It sounds too good to be true." Something in her tone struck him, compelling him to push beyond mere promises. "I'll be here with you, not just as a benefactor but as a partner," he declared, intensity coursing through his words. In that moment, he understood the resolution he made was not just about her journey. It was an embodiment of his desire to reshape his own past. In the ensuing silence, Jack realized he was on the precipice of redefining what mentorship truly meant in his life. It was not just an act of charity. It was an intentional intermingling of lives that held the potential for profound change. But he was still uncertain. Was he ready to reveal his past struggles to someone like Maria, who might not yet comprehend the burdens behind his polished exterior? In that moment, everything hung in delicate balance, their mutual vulnerability held together by threads of possibility as hope dared to bloom between them. "Jack," Maria spoke, breaking the contemplative silence. "What if I can't?" He met her gaze, feelings of determination battling with lingering insecurities. "Then we find a path around it," he replied. "Together." The air crackled with unexpressed possibilities. What lies ahead for them would demand unyielding trust and transformation within both their lives. The challenge of intertwining their realities loomed larger than he had anticipated. As he stared into the unfamiliar territory of shared vulnerability, a new uncertainty flickered at the edges of his mind. What would it take for him to completely let go of the tightly held narratives of his past? And could he trust her enough to embark on this journey together? The tension hung there, a palpable invitation to further discovery. Maria's eyes reflected not just hope, but a challenge. Jack realized he would have to confront not only her doubts but also his own, if they were to venture into the unknown realms of their potential. They both stood at the threshold of a convergence, two lives parallel yet divided, ready to explore the profound depths of change together. What lay ahead would not only redefine who they were, but also unravel the truths that lurked in the shadows of their pasts, waiting to be brought into the light. What happened when dreams collided with reality, and could two disparate lives evolve into something unimagined? The kitchen's familiar hum faded, only to be replaced by a suffocating quiet that amplified the unspoken fears hanging between Jack and Maria. He felt as though they were poised at the edge of a chasm. One step forward meant plunging into the unknown, but wriggling back into comfort seemed like the greater risk. Jack's decision to step into this role as a mentor was not made lightly. He could feel the weight of previous failures tugging at the corners of his mind, whispering doubts that threatened to overwhelm him. What if he faltered? What if he became too invested, only to let her down like others had let him down? Adrenaline thrummed within him. In mentorship, he would have to reveal aspects of himself he had long buried. "Maria," he began cautiously, weighing each word. "What if we also carve out some time for you to share your passions? It doesn't have to be just about science. What about painting or writing? Something that feeds your soul?" She looked at him, skepticism shadowing her expression. "You mean to offer me distractions? What good would that do?" "It's not a distraction. It's nourishment," he countered, a hint of urgency bleeding into his voice. "We can't build a new foundation without understanding what fuels your fire. I want to help you cultivate your entire self." His own voice echoed with a challenge that rippled through him. He recalled his early days, how ambition overshadowed the raw essence of what brought him joy. He had smothered his creativity beneath pristine spreadsheets and corporate jargon. This wasn't just about Maria anymore. It was about discovering the essence he had hidden under layers of corporate success. "So you want me to stuff more into my already crammed life?" she shot back. "That doesn't make sense." "Not more," he revised. "Just different." He watched her struggle. Could he convince her to envision a life that didn't merely revolve around societal obligations? Yet he was aware it wasn't just Maria's dreams hanging in balance. He felt an ember from his own suppressed desires flickering to life. Could he afford to recognize those? "What if you could create space?" Jack pressed. "Not just on the calendar, but in your mind. To think big. To dream even bigger." Her eyes narrowed for a moment, and then flickered with the first glimmers of curiosity. "Space for what?" "For your science, for artistry, for hope. We could build you a schedule that allows you to breathe and live fully. Where would that space take you?" The intensity in his voice steadied, as the thrill of possibility swirled between them. Maria's shoulders, once rigid with hesitance, relaxed slightly as though he had unwound an unseen clasp. "Maybe. But what if I fail?" "Failure is part of growth," he replied, though the echo of rejection in his past thudded uneasily in his chest. "Let's turn that fear into our ally." The sincerity in his eyes clashed with the frail voice of limitation that echoed through his own heart. Could he afford to dig through his insecurities to share this truth? Could he confront those feelings of inadequacy to help her discover her vision? With each passing moment, the tether of his old defenses loosened. "Here's a proposition," he suggested, and her cautious gaze invited him to delve deeper. What if we start with a single hour a week? No pressure. Just experimenting. Experimenting? She echoed, confused but intrigued. Yes, an hour to explore. Choose anything. Science, art, whatever calls to you, he clarified, the urgency of authenticity woven through his words. Let it be a space for exploration, not judgment. Her hesitation was palpable, but curiosity glimmered like a distant lighthouse in the fog. An hour. I can manage that. As she tentatively grasped the idea, a rush of relief, minged with fresh trepidation, washed over him. The commitment felt like an uncharted territory, a promise to her and to himself. Could this shared venture liberate them both? Would it allow him to cultivate the qualities he had suppressed for so long? Jack stood at the threshold of anticipation and fear, acutely aware of how intertwined their fates had become. They were two disparate souls, desperately seeking a new horizon, yet clinging to unresolved shadows. Let's chart this out, he suggested, feeling emboldened by the promise of what lay ahead. As partners. But the deeper questions lurked in the recesses of his mind. Was he truly prepared to unearth the vulnerabilities he'd shelved away? As they began discussing the logistics, Jack felt the currents of change swirling around them, an electrifying mix of hope and uncertainty, navigating a path illuminated by shared aspirations. What he didn't realize was that the hour they carved out together was just the beginning of a journey that would not only redefine Maria's dreams, but would challenge him to confront the currents still holding him captive. As the conversation resumed, a flicker of excitement sparked in him. He knew the challenge was to confront the truth behind the shadows. With each word and each hour, they would reveal hidden terrains of their lives. And what if, after all, those revelations unmasked not only success or failure, but the intertwined destinies neither had anticipated? The following week, Jack felt the weight of their agreement more acutely than he anticipated. As he entered the kitchen, a sense of unease mingled with anticipation. His mind buzzed with possibilities. How would this hour of exploration unfold? Would Maria's lingering doubts simmer yet again? Or would they ignite a flame of creativity he so desperately wanted her to embrace? His traditional backdrop of pots and pans clattered in harmonious discord, a stark contrast to the quiet contemplation that enveloped him. He knew he was stepping into a new frontier, not just for Maria, but for himself. Planning a shared exploration meant he needed to confront what had lain dormant in his own life. But each thought encountered an invisible barricade born of years spent masked by productivity. Jack set a timer on his phone and closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the comforting aroma of spices that clung to his apron. This was not merely about providing a space for Maria to explore. It was about finding clarity for his own long-muffled desires. Could he effectively sift through his complicated emotions while facilitating hers? When Maria arrived, excitement shimmered beneath her usual guarded demeanor. She stood before him, an air of resolve replacing her habitual skepticism, and he felt a pulse of inspiration flicker between them. "I think I want to start with writing," she declared, eyes brightening with the mention of her passion. "I used to love it, but I haven't done it in so long." "Writing sounds perfect," Jack replied, his voice firm yet encouraging. "Let's write something together. Could be a story, poetry, anything goes." The mere suggestion reminded him of long-forgotten dreams of storytelling that had fallen by the wayside during his climb up the corporate ladder. Maria's brows furrowed momentarily. "What if it's awful?" "A story isn't about being perfect," Jack said, acknowledging her vulnerability with quiet firmness. "It's about the act of creating, the rawness of your thoughts making it to paper." Her hesitation lingered, but Jack noticed the flicker of her ambition battling the doubt within. She plopped down with a notebook and pen, while Jack took a seat beside her, ready to share the experience. That initial hour unraveled in surprising ways. Maria sparked with enthusiasm, as letters transformed into words, and words morphed into stories spilling onto the page, shedding the weight of her fears as she wrote. Jack, meanwhile, grappled with an unexpected vulnerability. As he joined her, the act of writing pushed him to confront long-ignored aspects of his own narrative. He sketched out brief passages, drawing from his life's experiences, motivating him to face the truths obscured by success. Yet, as their narratives intertwined with laughter and introspection, doubt seeped in. Was he truly capable of confronting the specters of self-doubt he had amassed over time? As a manager, he had often shushed his own creative urges under the veil of professionalism. Now, pen in hand, was he unleashing an unknown part of himself? Jack's fingers hovered above the paper. Unrealized stories, untold emotions resonated within him. A sharp intake of breath reminded him. This was more than mentoring. This was an awakening. With each keystroke, he felt a catharsis brewing. Could confronting his past facilitate their growth? Fleeting moments escaped him as he felt himself retreat into reflective contemplation, drawn back by Maria's voice, alive and passionate, eager to share her growing confidence. In that space, connection deepened. Vulnerability revealed itself unnoticed, as they forged paths ignited by creativity, commingling echoes of doubt and conviction. But as the hour drew to a close, a sudden tension gripped Jack. What if this exploration revealed more than hidden talents? What would unfold when the story's finished and the pages turned? As Maria looked up, eyes sparkling yet filled with trepidation, Jack couldn't ignore the tightening in his chest. The realization that change was inevitable and possibly more profound than either had anticipated. Together, they had awakened possibilities transcending ink and paper, leading them to uncharted territories both exhilarating and terrifying. "You really think we can keep this up?" Maria asked, vulnerability surfacing again. "You bet," Jack replied, a mix of warmth and determination flooding his voice. Yet as they exchanged thoughts on their next session, an undercurrent of uncertainty stirred within him. What if pursuing this journey meant confronting truths about his failures and calling him to reckon with the aspirations he had buried alive? A sense of dread and excitement filled the air as they left the kitchen. The world outside brimmed with unexpected challenges. Would their voyage uncover unprepared truths, jolting each of them from their comfort zones? With thoughts racing and possibilities blooming, Jack felt a new tension forge, an intersection of ambition, vulnerability, and an inevitable confrontation that loomed just ahead. Would this journey transform them both, or would fear reign? As they ventured deeper into the unfolding narrative, a question remained. Was it the hour of exploration that held the key to liberation, or would they inadvertently unearth their deepest selves, inviting the confrontation they both secretly feared? The next week brought with it a measure of anxious anticipation for Jack. As he prepared the kitchen for their scheduled session, he couldn't shake the thought that, unbeknownst to Maria, their innocent exploration was morphing into something far more significant for him. His task was no longer merely to facilitate another creative venture, but to navigate the undercurrents of his own forgotten aspirations alongside hers. Stirring a pot of simmering broth, he reflected on how, in the churn of his workdays, the thrill of creative pursuits had been relegated to mere memories. Confronting Maria's emerging vigor revealed the void of his own enthusiasm, the way ambition had replaced joy like a shadow swallowing light. They were both on the precipice of discovery. But what if his journey echoed a deeper yearning, one he had avoided for years? As she entered, Maria's energy cracked through the air. The radiant excitement on her face ignited a spark within him. "Today I was thinking about poetry," she announced, her usual caution stripped away, replaced by an eagerness that tugged at Jack's heart. "Poetry can be very powerful," he encouraged, surprised at how genuinely he meant it. "Let's explore your thoughts like a canvas. No fear, just paint with words." They settled into that familiar rhythm of creation, notebooks opened and pens poised. Maria plunged into the comforting embrace of the process, words flowing as if unearthing treasures long buried. Jack envied her uninhibited expression, each simile and metaphor slipping past the barriers he had erected around his artistic spirit. With every line, she transformed anxiety into lyrical insight. A quiet wisdom emerged within her verses, and he couldn't help but wonder, why had he suppressed his poetic leanings for so long? As he attempted to conjure verses of his own, Jack wrestled with emotions rising like a tide. He remembered how writing used to be magic, freedom wrapped in ink. But ambition had tethered him to a life of conventions where creativity seemed frivolous. Each attempt at poetry felt like trying to breathe with a weight on his chest. Uncertainty had wormed its way back into his thoughts, mingling seamlessly with the push to create. Did Maria sense his struggle? Would she name the fear he couldn't articulate? In a rare moment, as if sensing his silence, Maria paused and looked at him, her pen briefly still. "What are you thinking?" she asked, curiosity threading her tone. His heart raced, a visceral response to her question, and for a fleeting second, he contemplated retreating into careful pleasantries. But something shifted. "I've just been thinking, what if this isn't just about liberating your creativity? What if, in exploring your passions, I'm also facing my own failures?" Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, Jack felt the weight shift, their roles suspended in mutual vulnerability. The intensity of their connection flared, and he could almost hear the unspoken questions echoing between them. Was it really worth unearthing hidden failures? "Yes, but it's also about growth," Maria whispered back. "And sometimes we have to face those parts of ourselves, the cracks, the failures, before we can let the light in." The profundity of her insight pierced him, reminding Jack of the very purpose behind this arrangement. Each exploration, each moment spent creating together, had evolved into a space ripe for confrontation. Confrontation not only with their talents, but with the truths about their lives, the fears that haunted them both. Yet, as the hour slipped away, a hovering question soon emerged once again. What if their newly discovered strengths only served to amplify their weaknesses? Would they emerge from this journey empowered, or unravel with every layer of pretense stripped away? They both sensed the impending transformation gripping the air, and Jack pondered their next move. Discomfort danced at the edges of his thoughts, acknowledging that stories can bind, and they can also break. The real test lay ahead as the stakes escalated, both personally and professionally. As their laughter blended with silences filled with unexamined truths, Jack's heart raced in anticipation. The urgency of the moment crystallized. With each session, boundaries blurred further. Would they summon the courage to dive into the depths of their creativity, or would the tumult of their pasts constrict their growth, preserving the status quo? "Next time, let's dig deeper," Jack finally proposed, his voice laden with a determination that both excited and terrified him. Maria met his gaze, expression resolute. "Yes, let's be fearless." The air crackled with an electric tension, an unseen battle waged between ambition and doubt. Jack left that session aware that the real challenge wasn't just about pursuing passion. It was about embracing the potential consequences of that pursuit. As he stepped out of the kitchen, it became glaringly clear. They were unraveling realities that neither had fully anticipated. But at that moment, a lingering thought taunted him. Was he ready to face the chaos awaiting them in their next meeting, or would the fear of the unknown compel him to retreat once more? With his heart pounding, Jack firmly grasped the reality ahead and braced himself for the possibilities they were both leaning into, realizing that change had become the only certainty in their shared journey. Jack awakened the next day with an urgency that defied the habitual slow crawl of his mornings. Picture frames lining his wall, memories frozen in time, mocked him with the echoes of dreams deferred. The kitchen loomed in his mind, a sacred space transformed from a mere functional backdrop to a cauldron of potential and creativity. As he brewed coffee, he considered how this crossroads in his life not only involved guiding Maria's artistic journey, but entangled him in an awakening of his own. Arriving early for their next session felt imperative. In the quiet stillness of the kitchen, Jack laid out supplies. Fresh notebooks, vibrant pens, and an inspiring anthology of poetry. Today, he would confront his stifled passion, unravel the knots of self-doubt, and perhaps inspire Maria in return. The heavy weight of expectation pressed on him, but he steeled himself. It was time to embrace the risk. When Maria entered, the energy in the room seemed to shift. She radiated with a determination he had not seen before. "I've been thinking about an idea," she said, her enthusiasm infectious. "What if we wrote about our fears, use them as material?" The question sent ripples through Jack's mind. Fear had been a loyal companion, whispering its doubts at every turn. Expressing it on paper felt like standing naked in front of a crowd, vulnerable and exposed. Yet it sparked something primal within him, a flicker of anticipation. "Let's do it," he replied, his voice firm. "Let's layer each line with our truths." The process unfolded like a delicate dance, with each word sparking further revelations. Jack's internal landscape evolved with each verse he penned, darkly probing the recesses of his soul. As he traced his fears, failure, abandonment, false expectations, he felt an exhilarating rush transform his anxiety into a source of strength. With each keystroke, Jack's narrative veered away from self-pity towards acceptance. As she read aloud from her own writing, Maria's courage illuminated the air. "It's daunting, writing that nakedly," she admitted, "but it's also liberating. The fear loses its grip on us when we put it out there." Caught in the genuine connection they were forging, Jack leaned closer. "But what if we discover more than we bargained for? What if these truths reveal parts of us we're not ready to confront?" "Isn't that why we're here?" she challenged gently. "To grow, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be." They exchanged contemplative glances, realizing they were teetering on the edge of something pivotal. A visceral tension hummed in the air between revelations and possible breakdowns. For Jack, cozying up to fear became not merely an act of catharsis, but the crucible of his rebirth. Hours passed, the world outside the kitchen oblivious to the turmoil threading through their hearts. An adventure unfolded before them, unearthing hidden depths and possibilities neither had anticipated. As Jack penned the final lines of his piece, he felt the weight of lost aspirations lift, replaced by a reassuring echo of resolve. But in the moments that followed, uncertainty clawed at him. Would this unearthing sustain the momentum they had initiated? When faced with the prospects of true growth, would they cower or soar? The looming shadow of self-doubt wouldn't recede quietly. The conversation shifted toward life outside the kitchen, a task that struck Jack with renewed urgency. What awaited them beyond their poetic sanctuary? "I feel like we're on the cusp of something transformative," Jack said, his eyes scanning Maria's face, seeking affirmation. "But I worry. What if we push deeper, only to unravel?" Her steady gaze met his. "Then let's lean into it. Why shy away from the discomfort? It's part of the journey." Jack's heart raced again, as reality settled around him. The aura thickened, tangible and electrifying, as the question lingered. Wouldn't the chaos of confronting their deepest fears ignite a path toward understanding and resolution? "There's no turning back," he finally whispered, feeling the palpable tension between them. Their paths interwoven, Jack dared to dream of the next session, where their truths could morph into something greater. But behind that dream lay the raw fear of failure, a haunting specter waiting at the door. With every word exchanged, Jack knew he was inching closer to an abyss that could reshape their destinies. Would he muster the courage to take that leap, knowing that true transformation demanded total exposure? The answer awaited him, cloaked in shadows, at their next meeting. Jack arrived the following afternoon, hovering between anticipation and apprehension. The kitchen, their safe haven, had taken on a life of its own, almost pulsing with the energy of their earlier sessions. The sunlight streamed through the window, creating patches of gold on the worn floor. somehow mirroring his own journey from darkness to light. He placed the notebooks on the table, a physical reminder of the crossroads he faced, not just in aiding Maria's growth, but in his own reclamation of creativity and purpose. The sound of the door creaking open jolted him from his thoughts, and there she was again, the embodiment of potential. Maria's eyes sparkled with excitement, an electric freshness filling the air around them. "I've been working on a piece," she stated, her eagerness spilling over. "It's about acceptance. How we have to embrace our fears to find out who we really are." Acceptance. The word echoed in Jack's mind like a drum. He never considered that embracing what terrified him might become his path to liberation. "Let's hear it," he encouraged, noticing how every shred of hesitation crumbled away from his voice. There was a shift. He wasn't merely a facilitator today. He felt like a participant, ready to face whatever awaited him. As Maria read, her vulnerability carved open wounds of her past, moments of rejection, self-doubt, and painful regrets. Each word pushed Jack, urging him to confront the remnants of fear that still clung to him like shadows in his mind. "That's beautiful," he remarked when she finished, and a new thought emerged within him. Maria's courage illuminated his own buried emotions. "Can you relate?" she asked, tilting her head, her sincerity piercing through his protective facade. The truth shuddered beneath the surface. Could he share the tangled thicket of his fears? In that moment of connection, his own narrative teetered precariously, begging to be voiced. Drawing a deep breath, he hesitated at first, wrestling with pride and honesty. "I've always worried about expectations, my own, and those imposed by others. I've let them build walls." Maria watched him, eyes flickering with understanding. "Walls can keep us safe, but they also separate us from our true selves." Intrigued and unnerved by her insight, Jack took a bold step. "Then let's break those walls, right here, right now." He grabbed the pen, the ink filled with both desperation and courage. "Let's challenge each other to write what we fear to say." In the next moment, silence fell, heavy and weighted. Jack's pulse quickened as he contemplated the implications. The act of wrestling with words transformed into a pilgrimage of sorts, with unspoken truths surfacing, waiting for their moment to emerge. As Jack began to write, he faced buried anxieties. Ghosts of failure, the agony of never living up to his dreams, and the ache of letting down those he cared about surfaced. Each word became a liberation, inching him towards self-forgiveness. Minutes melted into hours, but that sense of urgency never waned. The notebook transformed into a tapestry woven with raw honesty, reflections that challenged the very core of who he believed he was. Each line unshackled a piece of himself, the vulnerability slowly giving way to resilience. Finally, he looked up, meeting Maria's gaze. "This process, it's frightening but exhilarating. I can feel the weight lifting." "Then we keep going," she replied, her tone unwavering, as if offering a lifeline. "It's time to weave our truths into something greater." Suddenly, the specter of self-doubt loomed larger. Would this moment translate into real change? Would he actually find a way to navigate the tumultuous waters he had once avoided? Jack knew that tomorrow could either mark a step into the light or draw him deeper into solitude, one decision separating the dream from the nightmare. He realized they teetered precariously on the precipice of revelation. In this moment, he had to choose: continue the journey into vulnerability or retreat into familiar shadows. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Maria's voice cut through his swirling thoughts. As the weight of that question sank in, Jack felt his heart race. Something enormous lay just beyond the edge of this journey, and he was faced with the ultimate choice. Would he dive into the unknown, or step back into his comfort zone, allowing fear to hold him captive yet again? The answer lingered tantalizingly close, but only a leap would reveal what awaited him. Jack stared at the blank page, overwhelmed by the silence that hung between them. The air in the kitchen was charged, vibrating with the unspoken realities both he and Maria carried. Their fears, dreams, and aspirations blending into a tapestry of potential together. He felt an urgency to break the stillness and forge ahead into the unknown, where growth awaited them both. In that moment, everything he had experienced with Maria flashed before his eyes, the laughter they shared, the ocean of tears they navigated. It had guided him to confront the limitations he had placed on himself, shackles of his own making. No longer was he merely a billionaire hiding behind an empire built on numbers. He was a man reclaiming his lost artistry, connecting with a young girl navigating her own chaotic reality. "Let's write," Jack declared, infusing the words with newfound determination. "Not just about our fears, but let's craft a story together, something that encompasses everything we've learned." Maria's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "What kind of story?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "A story of resilience," he responded, an ember of inspiration igniting within him. "The journey we took to understand ourselves, how our fears tried to hold us back but ultimately helped us discover our true selves." As they embarked upon this creative venture, words flowed like rivers from their pens. Jack began weaving their joined narratives, the ink becoming the bridge connecting their disparate realities. With each sentence, he transformed fear into dialogue, exploring the vibrant spectrum of emotions that resonated within him. In this act of creation, he felt the barriers constructed over years begin to erode. Jack shared his childhood disappointments, the expectations that weighed heavily on him, and the way they had forged an identity rooted in survival rather than fulfillment. Maria understood intuitively. She scribbled alongside him, breathing life into her own truths. The pressures she faced at school, the isolation often felt behind her responsibilities. They were no longer just a wealthy businessman and a struggling maid's daughter. They were collaborators embarking on a journey to share their collective experiences, and in doing so, remained unflinching in their vulnerability. The weight of their truths blossomed into characters, figures representing their fears, hopes, and the wounds they had carried for far too long. The progress felt monumental, and as Jack turned the page, he sensed something beyond the mere act of writing. They were sculptors reshaping their identities and narratives. The realization struck him hard. This endeavor wasn't simply a project. It was a personal reclamation of lost ambitions and a commitment to reshape their futures. As the hour waned, Jack paused, taking a moment to drink in their progress. "This feels transcendent," he said, awe pooling in his voice. "We've not just created a story. I feel like I'm finally on the path to understanding who I am." Maria smiled. A glimmer of recognition painted across her features. "We've unlocked something in ourselves." Jack took a deep breath, realizing that his transformation wasn't just rooted in helping Maria. It was intricately tied to their shared journey. He had relinquished the armor of aloofness that had gripped him for so long. "I want to do more, beyond these walls. I want to connect with others, show them that they too can overcome their barriers," he said, a sense of resolve strengthening with each word. Maria nodded thoughtfully. "We can share our story, help others see that they're not alone." Satisfaction settled in Jack's chest, a burgeoning hope for not just Maria's future but also his own. They could pave the way for others trapped in cycles of doubt. Through their collaboration, they had inspired one another, igniting the embers of their passions into a blazing fire. In that kitchen, where once he stood hesitating at the edge of self-discovery, a new sense of purpose coalesced, ones that would transcend his wealth and redefine him. Jack Thompson, the billionaire, was evolving into something greater, a mentor, a partner, and a true advocate for youth trying to carve their paths through the complexities of life. "Let's share our story. It can be our way of giving back," Jack proposed, feeling the vision taking root. "Definitely," Maria affirmed, excitement twinkling in her eyes. Together they would craft not just a narrative but a movement, an invitation for others to confront their fears, embrace their passions, and step into vulnerability with courage. As Jack gathered their pages, glancing up at Maria, he felt a surge of hope wash over him, a blend of satisfaction and pride for the individual spaces they occupied and the collective journey that lay ahead. They were not just two souls intertwined in this moment. They were embarking on a lasting journey, preparing to impact lives beyond the limits of their circumstances. This moment marked a permanent shift. His burdens had given way to clarity of purpose, and Maria, once resigned to her struggles, now stood on the precipice of endless possibilities. "Today marks something significant," Jack stated, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders, an exhilarating freedom cascading throughout his being. As they began to draft their first outline, certainty washed over him. They would both become who they were always meant to be, beacons of hope, messengers of resilience, and partners in transformation, shaped not by ambitions, but by the courage to become their authentic selves. In that dynamic kitchen, shadows of fear gave way to light, illuminating the path of limitless potential that lay ahead. Now, it's your turn to act. You need to subscribe now. Don't let this journey end here. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more heartwarming stories. Comment your thoughts and theories about this incredible transformation. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need inspiration in their lives.